What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Till Mets Do Us Part. We are live on YouTube. We are live on Twitter or X or whatever it's called. But of course, the best way to interact with the show live is right here on YouTube, where your questions, your comments, your concerns, your greetings, like Douglas Barnes saying, "What's up, y'all?" All of it comes in real time. We can see it, we can react to it, and you can become a full-fledged participant in the conversation, especially here in the off season. You know, something you say, a question you might bring up might gear a big chunk of the show and where the direction goes. So all of that is important, but we understand that not everybody can interact with the show that way, and that is all good. You know, there are plenty of other ways that you can listen and be a fan of the show, a participant in the show. We'll get into that stuff later, but if you want to watch live, the best way to make sure that you do that is to subscribe to the YouTube channel and turn the notifications on so that you know when we are going live. Usually it is Wednesdays at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. Anyway, I am John Sapanaro. I'm out in Los Angeles, California. My co-host, Matt Ibby Ibanez, holding it down in New Jersey. Ibby, we have a surprisingly busy day for this time of year as far as baseball goes. But before all that, how you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good, John, especially after the presser, which we're going to get into in a little bit, and all that's going on with our team. Look, there's some good, and we'll talk about it with the presser, and there's some ugly stuff that we just saw before that we're going to talk about. That's going to really spark a lot, I think, of the conversation, not only based off of the presser, but what this team needs moving forward. So it's definitely going to be an interesting show, but I'm very excited to get into it, and let's do it. Let's have a show. Let's have some fun.
Me too. And you know what? Like Douglas Barnes says, yes, sometimes you can learn about Vegemite on crackers too. That's all part of the experience that is Till Mets Do Us Part. If you guys want to hear about more of, we could just skip the Carlos Mendoza stuff, Ibby, and I could just talk about.
Let's go back to Australia. Let's do that.
Going back to Australia. Yeah, we don't have to talk about it. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, we're going to start with Carlos Mendoza. He has his introductory press conference a couple days ago. Obviously, some other content creators have already reacted to it, of course, because either their show comes out before ours or they drop, on atypical schedules just to react to stuff. I watched some of them, really good stuff. And so I don't think, and I say this respectfully, Ibby, I don't think us or any of the other people are going to be breaking new ground when it comes to Carlos Mendoza, because the consensus that we talked about last week was that a lot of people were, kind of surprised by the hiring. And not in a negative way, just in a general way, and that a lot of us don't know a ton about him, myself included. We're finding out more and more every single day. We're finding out more from the press conference and all this stuff. We're going to continue to find out more, and ultimately we won't know until he starts to manage games, and I don't mean spring training games. I mean the ones that count for real. But I will say this, Ibby, I'm a firm believer that doesn't really matter if you're especially a manager or a coach or something like that. With players, it could be a little different, but basically it doesn't really matter to me if you win a press conference, but it certainly matters to me if you lose one. And so Carlos Mendoza won the press conference for all intents and purposes. He said all the right things. I think he said some things that, again, surprised some Met fans. I think in this case, in a positive sense, because we got to know him a little bit more. So I think that he won, and it's not to diminish that, but I always am a firm believer in, look, you better win the press conference, because most of your job, or at least 50% of your job, is dealing with these media people. And so if you come out of the gate and you're not good, it always brings me back to Adam Gase and the New York Jets. It was like, I didn't like the hire. The press conference was brutal. His eyes were darting all over the place. He looked like a scared marsupial down in Australia. That's what he looked like. He looked like a wombat that was just terrified that he was going to fall prey to like a dingo or something. Yeah. So look, all jokes aside, you want the guy to win, and Carlos Mendoza won. So for me, that's the most important part of what was otherwise, I think at this point in the offseason, a non-story. You're going to have an introductory press conference, and it's going to go a certain sort of way. And yes, this is a good point. Subway to Shea, Aunt Rivera bringing it up. Callaway didn't have a great press conference. He certainly did not. And then we've got CP's New York Sports Network saying Adam Gase. Yeah, what an awful press conference. That's the one, like, Callaway's wasn't great, but the one that always sticks out to me as a Mets and Jets fan, like, you cannot have a worse press conference than Adam Gase had. So anyway, to the positive, Carlos Mendoza was good. I liked his answers. And you know what? It was the kind of press conference for me, Ibby, where it endeared him to me, because if I wasn't a Mets fan, let's say he was hired to be the the manager of the Yankees, let's say, and I watched a snippet of that press conference, I'd be like, man, good for him. You know what I'm saying? Like, even if he was hired to work for a team that I didn't root for, I would come away from that press conference saying, like, this guy seems like a good dude. Good for him finally getting his shot to have the big job. So that's my biggest takeaway. What was yours?
I mean, I put out a tweet on it shortly after the presser happened, and I basically said, baseball pressers are often littered with cliches and repetitive coach speak. This felt different. I thought Mendoza poured out a fire, love, and passion for the game. We all know there's only so much a manager can do. It's time for Stearns to build a roster that allows Mendoza to cultivate the environment that he spoke on and establish the identity this team needs in order to succeed. So once again, it's just echoing things I've said before on the show, and that's, there's only so much, again, that Carlos Mendoza can do. Like, his job is to go out there and, like I've always said, manage the media, do his best. And he spoke on that, saying how, it's my job to communicate properly to you, the media, so then the media takes that message and gives it to the fans. So we're all basically on the same page. And I think, being cohesive and being on the same page was a big theme of the pressure in general between not only Mendoza and the media, but Mendoza and Stearns and the rest in general. But yeah, I really felt that he did a fantastic job in controlling the room in a good way. Like, he was stern, but he was confident. So it's like, you can be stern with things and not come across like a dick. Like, in that sense, like he was able to command the respect. People felt great for him, and I've seen him do the media junket and going around, and I saw him on Foul Territory today. He did a great job there, just talking about, and you can see that he is just beaming with excitement, and it's an energy that I think that this team needed, and I just feel that it's a very strong fit, and I'm when you have that, what I think has been lacking, and that's that cohesiveness between all parties. I really felt that when Mendoza is sitting there with Stearns and they're speaking and they're giving their answers, it felt like everybody was ready to be on the same page. It wasn't so much so, I'm here, but I know that I have a larger standing because I have this resume and this. And it's like, no, we're starting from scratch. We're together. We are going to go as far as we go together. We can't, divert and go different ways. It's not going to work. And that's the way I really came out of that feeling confident, because they both felt like they were on the same page. And like I said, the love, the passion, and the fire was definitely there. And it's always great to see a guy that excited when he's, sacrificed so much throughout his entire career to finally get that shot on a big stage like this. Yes, it could be scary. It could be a point where he spoke on today on Foul Territory, like, he was joking around, basically saying that, when he was doing a lot of the bench coach duties, like, in the beginning, it could be a little bit daunting, but as you get more experience, it becomes a lot more easier. So he gets to this stage, and it's like, now he's ready to take everything on because he's taken on so many different avenues throughout the game of baseball. It's just awesome to see. It really is.
I agree. And, a lot of people throw in their 2 cents in the chat, which is exactly what we want. But continue to do that. If you haven't commented yet on what your biggest takeaway, I don't think anybody's going to shock us here in the comments. I could be wrong, but I don't think anybody's going to shock us and say,
Careful,
this guy
you never
sucks.
know.
I hated it. Yeah, I know. I'm poking the bear.
You never know.
But no, I don't know how you could come away from that press conference feeling that way. So I don't expect to see that, but please keep them rolling in. Like Shay says, I mean, the media force-fed us counsel, and we chose differently, but he's orange and blue now, so support him is all we can do. And I do think there was a little bit of media force-feeding, to use his terminology, but I also think, look, it was an obvious fit. Stearns came from Milwaukee. Counsell was coming from Milwaukee. Counsell had a track record of success while also being a younger manager, also being somebody that they can work with, also being a quote-unquote big-name manager and not a first-time manager. So I think there was a little bit of media rhetoric there, but I also think it just kind of is what it is. That was the marriage that people were going to want to see. CP saying the SNY live chat was absolutely egregious during that presser.
I brought that up because I saw Chris while he was in there, and I was leaving some comments too from the show page's handle, and it was absolutely ridiculous between the questioning and then the bitching and the moaning and the complaining. But like, that was basically the types of people that you do not want to be around, even though they are Mets fans. It's like, you're not. I can't vibe with you. Basically, that was a lot, and it's sad because that's the channel for our team. It's a place where everyone should be really celebrating the guy and be ready to support him moving forward. And unfortunately, that chat was an absolute cesspool, just like Mets Twitter, but more so that chat, especially on a day where people are supposed to be celebrating as opposed to bitching and moaning.
Yeah, and look, again, is it the right hire? I don't know, but none of us know. Like,
We're gonna find out. We'll see.
Keith nailing it here, saying, I have no feelings until midway through the 2024 season. And like, I can appreciate that. We're reacting in the moment because this is the show and this is what we have to talk about. Obviously, we're not going to spend an hour talking about this because that is boring and we're not going to do that. But like, we do have to react to it. And so, but that is entirely a fair sentiment to say like, okay, we'll go out and do the job. So none of us know if he's going to be good. None of us know if he's going to be bad. So I think the landscape of like, oh, I hate this so much. It's like, dude, you don't know. You simply do not know. Jump back in. Patty saying absolutely endeared me as far as what I was saying in my open. Carson checking in saying, I fell asleep during Buck's opening presser. I'll admit it. Patty following it up by saying Carson has entered the chat. Always shots fired as far as Carson. And then Shea following up what he said, saying he wants to be here, meaning Mendoza. That's the dedication you need. And that's something that you and I talked about. I brought it up last week. It seemed like Counsell didn't necessarily want to be here. Would Counsell have taken the most money to come here if the Cubs weren't on the table? He probably would have. But I want a guy that wants to be here. I don't want the person. Again, I go get the money. You get all the money you could get whenever the market says you can get the money. This is not saying don't take the most money, don't offer the most money. Money is off the table for me. I'm just saying you want the guy that wants to be here. And I've always felt that way. And to me, the money part could then come secondary. If it's making him the highest paid, great. If it's not, that's great. Whatever it is, it is. Like, get the money that you can get. And I do want to bring this up. Matt Williams, who's joined the show before, I think this is a really good comment too. I actually think there are few great managers. The overwhelming majority nowadays are either okay or bad. Too much credit and blame is given to the manager, in my opinion. And then he follows it up by saying they either make mistakes or don't. And I think that's another fair another fair point to bring up when you're talking about the modern day manager in the MLB.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just trying to remember where I was going to go. I just lost my train of thought. God damn it! What? Where was I going? What were we just talking about?
We're talking about Carlos Mendoza. We're talking about
I'm trying to find
Counsell. I'm going to jump back.
No, that's what thank you.
Perfect.
I got Counsell. Like I thought it was
live,
improper.
folks. Anything can happen.
I forgot that someone was taking it out of context, which is never proper, and that's what happens a lot of times on Twitter and stuff like that. But when they showed a clip of Mendoza's presser and it's him upright, chest out, talking about the confidence that he has of being in the New York market and how excited he was to be here, and then you flash forward to the next cut, which was like unfair, like a 6 to 8 second cut of Counsell for his in Chicago. And it's him basically like, oh, I was really scared and unsure of myself. And I think it was basically cutting to a point where he was talking about the differences from Chicago and Milwaukee, but more so leaving Milwaukee for Chicago. I think it's where it was cut from. But again, you take something like that and it's improper to just pull from it and say, oh my God, this guy would have been a disaster. But one could say if you were worried about that, which is an inter division type of rivalry that could hurt where you went, I should say where you came from and where you ended up going, coming to New York is an entirely different monster where you're dealing with that, not so much just at the start of a presser and eventually it's going to fade away outside of a couple of games that you play during the season. But New York, you're in the pressure cooker nonstop. So again, it doesn't matter. It's not happening. He's in Chicago. We got our guy. I'm all about Carlos Mendoza and supporting him 1,000%.
Yeah, and this is the comment I was going to bring up from Carson where he says, New York sports fans want people who want to be here. It's as simple as that. And I think that's true in any fan base, but I think it is extra true when you're talking about New York and Chicago and Philly and Boston. There's that extra sense of pride in these like sports towns that are so, fervent. And then didn't feel that way with Counsell. Mendoza has the New York experience as a leading role for multiple years. It's a perfect hire. And I think from that singular standpoint, again, like Keith said, we'll find out in 2024. And like other
Right.
people are saying, hey, I'm going to reserve judgment. But I think from that particular standpoint that Carson just mentioned, I think he's right, Ibby. I think he's a perfect hire if you're looking for somebody who has experience in New York. You add into the fact that he is bilingual, which is always always a positive when you're talking about baseball. It's always a positive when you're talking about a city like New York. So I think that's an extra add-on. But when you're talking about just that singular experience of what he has, I think we talked about it last week. Like there's first-year managers and then there's first-year managers. And I think when you look at what Mendoza's done and what he's been able to do, like in the big city, under the big lights, albeit as the second in command, but he's done a lot of what we're going to want out of a manager. And I think from that standpoint, from what Carson said in the offseason where everything is sunshine and rainbows, I agree. I think it's a perfect hire for that context.
Yeah, and I think to go back to Keith's point, talking about 2024 midseason, I agree with that. But also, and we'll talk about this throughout the show, it's understanding that, again, manager can only do so much. And again, we can judge him based off of certain calls that might happen within given games and what have you, and how he handles the media and stuff like that. But again, we're going to talk about this roster for a good portion of the show. And it's understanding that there's only so much blood you could potentially draw from a stone. So it's like, he's going to need.
And it's a stone.
It's a stone, man. Like
it's a stone. It's a stone on a chain around your neck as you're jumping into the Hudson. That's what this roster looks like right now.
There's only so much that a manager can do. And that's why I said with the tweet that I put out right after the presser, it's like, there's only so much he can do. This is really on Stearns to give him some pieces that you can allow him to work with. And like I said, cultivate that environment that you want to have to create an identity that this team desperately needs. And that's the biggest thing I think that Stearns is going to be not only be doing this offseason, but the off seasons that follow as well. And that's really establishing an identity for this team that Mendoza can take and run with.
Yeah, jump back into the comments here. This is just a couple fun ones. Keep saying, Ibby got derailed when you lost your train of thought there for a second. And Matt Williams following it up by saying, my pearl of wisdom blew your mind. And Stevie Mack saying, hugs, not drugs, Ibby. That's the rule. Hugs, not drugs.
All good fun. All good fun.
No, of course. Look, and just to kind of put this manager conversation to bed, because I really don't want to talk much more about the manager. He had a good day. Congratulations to him. Well-deserved, well-earned all along the way. But I don't want to have too much of a conversation about him on November 15th. It just doesn't seem like the most productive use of our time. But I also, we talked about it when they were going to hire Buck. I said to you, I was like, look, I don't know, man. I think Buck is, everybody was like, Buck's the slam dunk. Buck's the slam dunk. Buck's the, you got to. A lot of people said that in the media. Now, I think this time around, it was Craig Counsell was the slam dunk. You got to. That's the one that makes the most sense. And at the time, and I since admitted I was wrong. I was like, look, Buck had a really good year last year. Or I guess 2 years ago now because the season's over. And I was like, look, Buck did a great job. They won 101 games, blah, 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 blah. Like, I guess I was wrong. But if you remember, Ibby, when that stuff was going on and we were talking about it on this show, I said, hey, you know what? I think we should go to the younger guy. Give me the Joe Espadas of the world. Like, I want somebody who's a little bit more kind of hitting on all cylinders, because the most recent version of Buck Showalter that we as baseball fans were exposed to was the guy in the booth. And I was like, look, the Buck Showalter that's part-time in the booth is boring. He's disinterested. He seems like he's a little out of touch. And look, say whatever you want about his bullpen management and where the team went this past year that led to his ultimate firing. I think some of that stuff by me was a little overblown, and some of it might have been true. So I don't put a huge stake on needing to have experience as a baseball manager. I know we've been burned with Mickey Callaway. I know we were burned victims of circumstance with Luis Rojas. I think he was burned on that one too. But again, I don't think that all of these first-time managers are created equal. I said at the time when they fired Luis Rojas that I thought he'd probably be a good manager somewhere else someday, and I still think he will be. I think Mickey Callaway's a fucking idiot, and I always thought he was a dumb bastard, so here we are, right? But so none of these situations are created equal, and I think the Mets have set themselves up for success as best as they possibly can in terms of the manager. Now, not everybody agrees. I don't know if this is trolling, but Yuki Matsui saying Mets $400 million payroll,
the Japanese pitcher driver
to drive a Ferrari. So, I think I have a feeling who's behind the curtain over there at Yuki. But listen, if not, everybody's entitled to their opinions, whether that's real or not. Like, that's the beauty of the live chat.
The most interesting thing about the conversation that we had way back when with Buck was, the reason why, and I'll back up why I said what I said about Buck back then and on why he was the slam dunk was because at the time the team was just in such disarray that you wanted somebody that was established that could, again, even though in his stays they were always short-lived in the sense where they start off hot and then eventually every single stop, they always tailor it off. And that's why he ends up getting canned in those spots. But he was
the adult in the room. He was the adult in the room for the Mets. Yes. Forget the other stops.
Yeah.
It was a veteran team that needed a solidifying presence. And, you're right. Buck was a slam dunk in that one regard. Slam dunk.
Right. And the one thing was just that the team was surrounded by so much turmoil with Mickey to Beltran to Rojas. Like there was so much going on. You needed something stable. And Buck Showalter's like, oh man, Buck Showalter, veteran, great resume, has won in places. I mean, he never won the big one, but has a strong record. Like this could help us get to a spot that can, better stabilize this franchise, if you will. And let's be honest, it was a short 2 years. It was quick, but at the same time, that because you have that, it allows you to step outside the box a little bit, to have that confidence to say, look, this team has players. Granted, not many. It's got a solid core. It needs work, but this is the right time to put someone that's a first year that has New York experience. We can plug them in here and we can go. As opposed to back then, I don't think it would have worked because I think based off of the circumstances of what the team was at the time, and eventually where it ended up going, I don't think a first year would have succeeded. And odds are we would have been in the same spot now that we would have been if we hired even an Espada or a Cuchara or whoever else. But instead, we probably would have been searching for someone with more experience this time around. So it's a little bit reversed, but I think we're in a better spot in the end.
Yeah, that's great. It actually follows up Shay's comments that were coming in right at the exact time you said that. But first, I'm going to jump in with Keith. I'm a truck driver, and I know how to drive a Ferrari. And Keith is a great truck driver. I've been on set with Keith, and he is a great truck driver. So, yes, truck drivers can drive Ferraris. Shay's saying, call it what it is. If you have a first-time manager that doesn't work, then you want a veteran manager. When you have a vet that doesn't work, then you want a fresh manager, and you rinse, repeat.
That's it.
And you did say that. And I think that part of that is true. I think it's a little bit more true when you go to the head coaching side on the NFL and you have a defensive-minded guy, then you switch to an offensive guy, then you go back to a defensive guy, then you go back. I don't think necessarily, and I'm not saying that you and Shay are wrong, I just don't think it's as locked in when you're talking about Major League Baseball managers, but that is certainly a pattern that a lot of teams follow. I think that Buck was the perfect person ultimately to guide the ship that was mostly veterans, with a lot of expectations where Cohen was trying to make a splash. Cohen was like, look, I'm trying to accelerate this 3 to 5 window. I'm trying to win a World Series in year 3. Boom, let's go do it. He was the guy. You don't want to give the keys to the city to a guy that's never done it before. You want to give the keys to a guy who's been there. Now, and I think the Mets are going to be competitive. I think the Mets are going to spend money. I think the Mets are going to build a competitive team. But like I said, Ibby, it didn't matter if they brought everybody back, including Buck, including Scherzer, including Verlander, all these guys. If the Mets had the year that they had, the expectations were always going to be lower heading into 2024 because 2023 was not good. 2022 was excellent, so the expectations were up here, and they added to it. Then you have a drop-off Then you have the second drop off because you unload all these vets and then you fire the manager. And for circumstances outside of their control, the GM resigns. You can lower those bar a little bit. Now, just because that bar is lower doesn't mean the Mets aren't going to be competitive. Doesn't mean they're not going to try to win. It just means you've got a little bit more room for error. And room for error is another way that I would interpret it as room for growth. Room for growth for the team, room for growth for the new manager, room for growth for the Luis Angel Acuñas of the world, the Jets Williams of the world, the Drew Gilberts of the world. If those guys find their way up here, and of course the people who are already up here, Ronnie Mauricio, Francisco Alvarez, people who are going to play a big part, of this team this season. So that said, let's bring this up because this has come up a few different times. Do you think they'll hire Willie? He means Willie Randolph as the bench coach, and we'll kind of get your thoughts on this. I'll give my 2 cents, and then we'll head into the break, and we'll talk about something completely different because, again, I'm tired of this conversation with respect to the fact that we need to have it. But your thoughts on Willie, he didn't say it outright to I don't know if Carlos mentioned this previously, but there's been a lot of things about Willie Randolph, and somebody said, hey, did he say it outright? Like, no, he just said that Willie Randolph was a huge influence on him and a huge part of why he is the coach, the manager that he is today. So your thoughts on maybe bringing in a guy like Willie Randolph to be the bench coach?
Look, I think everyone has fond memories of Willie while he was here and how he was, unceremoniously jettisoned the way he was 3:00 in the morning on the West Coast. That entire debacle of, the Wilpons and him and everything. So look, I think a lot of people look at it as a righting of a wrong, a mending of the fence, if you will, with a former Met that was here who had success. Yes, he's also mired with a lot of negativity because of 07, 08, and everything like that. But look, do I think it's proper? I mean, I have to look this up, but maybe off the top of your head, has Willie been involved on the baseball side in the last decade, like on the bench? Has he been?
I don't think in any full-time capacity. I can't think of his legitimately last job. Yeah, he's been around. He's been with the Yankees. He's been a special instructor. He's been a spring training guy. And anybody in the comments can correct me if I'm wrong, but he hasn't had a quote-unquote full-time in-season day-to-day baseball job since he left the Mets, I don't think. Is there a spot that he was a bench coach that I'm forgetting about?
Unless I'm telling you, I want to say it's at least 10, 12 years, maybe. Someone could double check in the comments. But either way, look, I trust the process that they're going through. And he spoke about it today on Foul Territory when they asked him the question about his staff. And he said they're in the early goings right now of working through their entire lists of people that they're going to be potentially interviewing and bringing in and speaking about. But I trust that process. And if that process comes back and they say, look, we think Willie makes a lot of sense for you, then I'm all about it. Look, I think a lot of Mets fans are just hopping on it right now because oh my God, Willie Randolph, remember 06? Remember that time when he was when he should have won, but it didn't happen. But I think that people go back to that and they have those rose-colored glasses, which is fine. I'm not bad-mouthing anyone who thinks that way. But I'm more focused on if it's the right hire based off of everyone else and it makes sense because he has that experience, because he's been in the New York market, because he's managed the Mets before. Sure, things have changed over the last 15 years or whatever, but regardless, been on the bench. If that's the right fit and that's what Carlos wants, then go for it. I'm all about it. I would love to see the mending of that fence with Willie. Do I think it has to be, oh my God, the only way you can fix this is if you make Willie the bench coach? It's no, there are other ways you can fix and repair relationships, which Steve Cohen has done fantastically over the last 3 years.
Better, I think, than any owner in New York sports has done.
Yeah.
Especially since his tenure, but he's really, really great at that. I looked it up. Oddly enough, his last coaching thing was, exactly what I was just about to pull up here. Randolph was Buck's bench coach in Baltimore, which is
you go.
Which is so ironic. And I was looking it up. It's funny that he pulled that up. He basically got screwed every stop. He did interview in 2008 to be the manager of Milwaukee.
I remember
he was a finalist, didn't get the job. People are pulling it up here in the comments, so I don't have to pull up everything. Thank you, Shay, for doing the legwork on it.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
He had this one season where he was a coach on Baltimore's staff alongside Buck Showalter. And then since then, he served as the third base coach for Team USA in one of the World Baseball Classics. And that's really been it. So,
Yeah.
look,
It's been a while. And he's what, 70?
You don't forget how to, you don't forget baseball if you're like I understand guys can be out of touch. I'm not saying that. And Willie Randolph at almost 70 years old, he might be out of touch. Who knows? But in terms of what he knows about baseball, to be a bench coach, as a former manager, as a longtime bench coach, as a terrific player, he's not going to forget that stuff. So I'm with you. I'm happy that they're allowing him to pick his person, or at least have a say, because going back to your original wording that you use all the time for it, the arranged marriage with a first-time manager and their bench coach, I don't think is a good way to go. Now, I'm not even dismissing out of hand that Eric Chavez can't stay on as the bench coach. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it can't be a foregone conclusion that these guys get forced together. If they like Chavez and Chavez is cool with sticking around and they want Mendoza to be in the room when they interview Chavez and Chavez makes his case and they decide that they want to go with those two guys, I don't think that's some death knell. I don't think that's like, oh my God, now what? And I don't think you need to have a guy who has a tremendous amount of managerial experience to necessarily be his bench coach, because again, he has had, and I'm talking about Mendoza here, he has had a ton of experience in both roles. So I agree with Subway to Shea. I agree with Ant, justice for Willie, but I don't think that that's the only way to achieve it. And Carson brought this up before. First-time managers and rookie managers are two different things. Callaway and Rojas were rookies. They never had developed experience as leaders. Mendoza does, along with the experience in New York. And it's that reason, Ibby, why I think that you don't necessarily need a Willie Randolph. You don't need a Buck Show. It wouldn't be Buck Showalter, obviously, but you don't need Buck Showalter. You don't need Ron Washington, who just went to Los Angeles. Like, you don't need that guy. If you have that guy, I think it's great, but I don't think you need that guy. I think this is fine the way it's set up, and I think it's fine for Mendoza to have a say in who he wants to be on his staff, because I think that that's the best way to have everybody pulling in the same direction. Like you said, it's almost a blessing in disguise. I think Epler could have done some good things under David Stearns, but it's almost a blessing in disguise that he had to resign, because now Stearns, on his own timeline, can pick whomever he wants to be his GM. Do I think Epler was bad? No, I think Epler probably would have done some of his best work working under a guy like Stearns. But I feel similarly about the bench coach here. I just want there to be synergy, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And I think, like I said, it doesn't have to be this grizzled veteran who's been in baseball his entire life and forever. Like, I get that it's a first time, and again, not to pick apart what Carson was saying, but like, considered first-time manager. It's not necessary that you have to have that guy who's been in baseball for 30, 40 years in order to find success with that new manager. Like, you can find success. Like you said, if that's with Chavez, great. If it's with somebody else that does well throughout the process and really clicks well with Mendoza, and he's like, look, I think this would be great. Let's go. And then that's what they want. So be it. Whoever it may be. And again, I would love, like, would it be cool if it was Willie? Sure. But I would only want that if that is what makes the most sense. Don't just do something to do something. Don't do something for PR. I think we're beyond that now with this Mets team and this front office and this ownership. I think we're beyond just doing things for PR and looking good. But if it comes back and he's the proper person, I'm all about it. But if someone else is, the right choice in that room, you go with that person. It's that simple. I want everyone together. I want everyone on the same page. And that's the only way that this team's going to be able to, like I said before, move forward. Let's all be on the same page and pull together.
Speaking of moving forward, Patty in NYC saying, no to Epler. Nope. In my opinion, he was a huge problem last season for Buck and the team. Well, you know what? Let's move forward. No, I'm not singling out Patty, but it was just funny. As you said that comment comes in. Yeah, I know I'm the one who brought it up. Carson also furthering what Patty said, saying Epler resigning wasn't a blessing in disguise. It was Christmas in October, and I'm Jewish. So, listen, we all have our thoughts and opinions, but no, in all seriousness, let's move forward. Shout out to Patty for being a great commenter and a great watcher of the show. Also,
always
just having a little fun. And with the interest of moving forward, let's turn the page now from the manager and the bench coach. Let's head into the break. We got about a half hour to play with. If you're watching for the very first time, Patty's saying, yes, please move on. If you're watching for the very first time, don't worry. The break is extremely short, although it's slightly longer than it used to be. It's a 20-second ad spot that we need for the audio version of this show. So, John Sapanaro, Matt Ibanez, Tilt Mets Do Us Part. We will see you in just a few seconds. Yo, just like that, we are back with Till Mets Do Us Part. We're live on YouTube. We are live on Twitter or X or whatever you call it. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibanez. We are doing the show like we do each and every single week. Subway to Shea. Insert the Subway to Shea commercial promo right here. Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
We always will promote Subway to Shea and Aunt Rivera wherever we can. So if you don't listen to his show, you definitely should.
Yes.
That said, watching this show live is the best way to have your questions, your comments, your ads for your shows put out here in real time. We understand that not everybody can do that. So if you can't, you can watch this show in its entirety. If you missed anything, if you get here late or you have to leave early, you can watch the entire thing. It lives forever on our YouTube channel, which is called Till Mets Do Us Part. You can also follow us for any kind of updates, things that might change, special episodes, things like that on Instagram and X at Till Mets Do Us Part. And also we understand that not everybody can watch the show at all. Sometimes you want to watch it. You want to see our faces and the cool Mets gear that we're able to get our hands on. And sometimes you can't do that. You want to just listen. Well, you can listen to the show starting tomorrow, courtesy of the Premier Podcast Network, wherever it is you get your podcast. I think that's all of the housekeeping things.
Well, we could also make sure we're making sure that we're hitting like on the video, subscribe on the video.
Thumbs up.
And anytime, again, I've been working hard when it comes to the YouTube channel and the shorts and things like that. I pumped out like 10 or 12 different shorts this past week from last week's show. I'm gonna try to do that moving forward. If you see those come up on your feed, make sure you watch it for those 20 seconds. Hit the thumbs up too. It helps us a lot. It's helping us grow. We've been doing a great job in that over the last month or so. So that's going to continue because we want to keep growing this channel. So again, like, subscribe, comment whenever you can. It's always appreciated.
Yes, and of course, when you subscribe, that's what I was going to say. Turn those notifications on so that you are alerted, so that you're like, hey, I'm home. It's a rainy day. It's cold out, whatever. I want to be involved in a Mets conversation. I'm not usually here, or I can't be here every week. You'll know, hey, they're going live now. Why don't I pop in for a little bit? And to that end, want to shout out Darren, all the way from the UK, who jumped in a little bit ago. I'm not sure if Darren's still here because I know the time schedule is crazy, but saying, what's up, guys? Hope everybody's doing well. Can't wait for next season. LFGM. Darren is a great overseas Mets fan. And I didn't know this. Before we get back into the conversation, Shay saying, happy belated birthday to Aunt Rivera. I did not know that it was your birthday this week or whenever it was. So
yesterday,
my bad. Yesterday. Okay. My bad. I didn't realize that. Happy birthday, Aunt. And then, yes, Shay saying it's a rainy day here in Los Angeles / Long Beach. It is very, very rainy here today. It's more like Seattle. And this is important. 5 general admission tickets left for the QBC. Only 5. I don't know what that means for some of the there are some elevated experience tickets, and Keith can let us know as far as what's left in total, if he has those numbers handy. But yeah, 5 GA tickets left. The QBC is happening soon. It's just basically 2 weeks away at this point.
2 weeks, yeah.
So, you definitely want to make sure that you check out the QBC. And then here we go. 2 blue VIP tables left. So tickets are dwindling. The QBC sells out. So if you have not decided yet, decide
party,
because it is a lot of fun and it is going to happen real quick. That said, let's get back into the Mets conversation. I think this is going to be longer than 20 minutes, which is what we have left. Ibby, you sent me this today.
Yes, I did.
The current Mets projected roster ranked by their WAR. And I don't care if you like WAR, don't like WAR, think it's good, think it's inflated, think it's whatever. This is bad. These are bad numbers across the board. All of those look gross. I don't care. I'll add this caveat in. I don't know if you don't understand war. Even if you don't, these are fucking bad. There's like four. God, I don't even know if there's four good numbers on it. There's definitely three. Senga's war is good, especially when you consider his rookie status coming over. Nimmo's is good. Lindor's is excellent. And, look, Alonso is down for what, it could be for him, but it's okay. So I think there's about four good numbers on there. Everything else.
Which is considered the core of
Correct.
the team. And like, you look at that and it's like, I know Patty was curious when I posted that before, and I was just like, woof, because it's like, I think that's where when you see those numbers, and again, projections are what they are. They're not the end all be all, but it gives you a little bit of an idea to work off of. And that idea is letting you know that David Stearns has a lot of work to do. And not always can you fix every single problem that a team has in one off season. Sometimes it takes one or two off seasons to get everything situated and proper. Do I think that they're going to spend money this offseason? Yes, clearly they have to. That list that we just put up there, that's not going to be the opening day roster. There are going to be changes. People are going to be brought in.
No, Ibby, it's going to be the opening day roster. The Mets suck. They're never going to win another game. Steve Cohen is just like Fred Wilpon. Don't you know? Don't you know?
The sad part is somebody will say that. That's the pathetic part. But no, like there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And we'll talk about some of the players that we think fit. And, that's going to be the conversation really for the next handful of weeks until a couple of those giant dominoes fall by the winter meetings when it comes to the Otanis and the Yamamotos of the world and the bigger ticket free agents, because obviously they're going to want to take care of those to set the market so that they can establish what others are going to be getting money-wise. But yeah, there's a lot that needs to be done. I thought James from Met Stuff did a great job really summing it up, and he just brought up how it's, this team needs, one or two top-end starters. This team needs one or two middle-of-the-road starters. This team needs pitching depth. This team needs at least two relief pitchers. This team needs someone else that can hit home runs. This team needs probably another infielder. This team needs a DH. It's like, there are so many things that this team needs and that Stearns is going to have to really get to work on. Do I think it can all be solved in one off season? I don't. Do I think he can do some good work this off season?
It needs to be solved in one off season. Steve Cohen is a billionaire. He has so much money. He has to have a $575 million payroll. He needs to buy another team and like the Baltimore Orioles and use them as the AAA affiliate. Don't you know this is how baseball works?
But the main thing, obviously, no, it's fine. The main thing is, understanding that when we show those numbers or when those numbers are posted, there'll be a whole write-up tomorrow on it from Zips. They're going to do a whole thing on all the teams in baseball. But the big thing is knowing that we're not saying that every position needs to be like Lindor and that's a 5 across the board. Like, no, you're not. But the sad part is Mets fans think that that's what they're, that's what they're entitled to, or that's what they think they're going to have. It's like, no, it's good to have those pieces, but you have to have some better pieces around them, the Lindors, the Nimmos, the Alonsos, the Diazes, the Sangas, to fill out a roster. Not everyone's going to be a 5, but you have to have things that, maybe they're a 2, 2.5, but at the same time, they're that number that, now, but there's progressions. There's a ladder that these players can be on, which is why Carson mentions it all the time in our chat and on his show as well. It's about getting younger. It's about having cheaper players as well. That's not me saying I want no money spent. That's just saying you look at any good team, look at the Dodgers. There's plenty of cheap money around, and then they spend money where it's needed. David Stearns has mentioned that, saying how, look, we are going to spend money when it makes sense. Everyone heard that quote yesterday, and they think, oh my God, they're not going to spend any money now because they're going to stink. It's like, no, if it's proper and makes sense, they're going to spend. If it makes sense with where the team is. Yamamoto, 25 years old, makes sense. They can shop there. They can shop there. And again, just throwing a name out there, and we'll mention him later. But Sonny Gray. I love Sonny Gray. I've been a Sonny Gray fan for a long time. Sonny Gray is 34 years old. Do I think Sonny Gray is a proper fit for this team right now? I don't. So it's like, it's understanding where you're going to be spending those big ticket items. It's that's the main part where Mets fans need to get their head screwed on properly.
I totally agree. And this is funny because Carson, reacting to that chart, says, why is Sarah McLachlan on our reliever depth chart? No one's dog is dying today. And Rael saying, a Sarah McLachlan reference was not on my bingo card for the pod, which is hilarious because there's no way to prove this. But before that comment from Carson came in,
yeah,
I was about to say, okay, so now for the rest of the show, I'm just going to put this graphic up and we are going to play a Sarah McLachlan song over it so we can all lament how bad this looks. And it's just funny that Carson used Sarah McLachlan in a different reference. That is hilarious to me. Look, when we look at this chart,
yeah,
it's not great, and there are ways to upgrade. There are also some places where you're obviously not going to move on from, right? When I look at this chart, Ibby, I see this and I say, there's no fucking way the Mets are trading Pete Alonso. The Mets are not trading Pete Alonso for like the most, like people are like, well, you know, if you get a good deal and you get a deal you can't say no to, there is no way. If you look at this graphic,
deal. Yeah.
There is no deal. Now, I'm not saying everybody who listens to this knows that I want Pete Alonso to be here for a long time. I think he deserves it. I think the Mets need him, blah, 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 blah. But I'm not saying the Mets are going to give him an extension this offseason. I'm saying there is no fucking way that when you look at this depth chart, the Mets are trading him. There is no amount of prospects. There is no amount of the Mets will not be more competitive next year without Pete Alonso. When you look around the diamond at the position players, who's gonna play first base? Vientos? Yeah. Are they gonna sign Joey Votto? Is that what you want? I love Joey Votto.
I love Joey Votto too. Yeah.
They're not signing Joey Votto.
No.
Could you sign Joey Votto to like a little tiny sweetheart deal as one of those things where like, hey, he does these things well and he could be a part-time DH, play a little first base? I'm not saying there's a machination where Joey Votto doesn't make sense. I'm just saying they're not going to replace Pete Alonso. You can't. This is on a down year, quote unquote. A year where he hit 200, not his 250, 260 that he's probably going to hit. So when you look at this, that's the first thing that jumps out at me. The second thing that jumps out at me is the Mets have two players who they absolutely need to rebound. One more so than the other, and I'll take them piece by piece, and you'll understand where I'm going with this. Mm-hmm. The two players that need to rebound are Marte and McNeil. For Marte, it is absolutely paramount because as bad as he was and as injured as he is untradeable. McNeil, on the other hand, I think in the short term next year, with the holes that they have, I think they should hang on to him because I don't think they're going to be able to fill all these voids. However, I also don't like trading low and selling low and all that stuff, but I could see them moving him because you could say, look, it was just a down year. His contract is super affordable. The guy can play 3 or 4 different positions, blah, 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 blah. So I think him getting back to the level that we want from him is a little less important than Marte because I just simply think McNeil is tradable and a trade candidate. Whereas Marte's untradeable at this point. So you just have to hope that Marte can be somewhat as good as he's been in his career. Those are the 3 biggest takeaways for me. I don't know when you look at that, if you see something else. That, and I guess you have to say pitching.
Right. We've spoken on pitching a lot, and we'll that'll continue to be the theme probably at the back end of the show, or just the shows moving forward throughout this offseason. But yeah, when I look at this, like I've been saying that I'm going into this offseason thinking that this team really, if we're being honest, has one outfielder, and that's Brandon Nimmo. That's the way I look at it. And look, do I want Starling Marte to do better? Of course I do. I mean, who wouldn't? Like, I thought he was the engine of this team when they did great in 2022. Like, he did everything. Do I think it's ever going to get back to that? I don't. I think it was Fangraphs that put out some of their projections for what stats may potentially be, and I think Marte was like around 250 with 11 home runs and like 60 something RBIs. And I saw that and I go, look, if you want that to be your rotating 4th outfielder that's coming off of the bench,
sure,
fine. I'm all about. That's fine. Because like you said, we can't trade him. Nobody wants him. So it's like, if that's what I'm going to get from my fourth outfielder off the bench, fine. You cannot. I do not care. You cannot go into this offseason thinking that Marte is going to be your right fielder. You cannot. You have to look at him as someone that can come off of the bench as, like, if anything, he's your fourth outfielder. And that's not saying much because he was terrible in the outfield last year. Now, is that because of the groin, because of the whole core? Was he hurt? I don't know. But what I saw, I thought it was disgusting. I thought it was ugly. So I cannot, with any confidence, think that he's going to provide much moving forward. It's brutal. It's honest, though, because that's the way I look at him. And I just go, you can't move him. I hope if those projections from Fangraphs, 11 home runs, 250, 60 RBIs, if that's what I'm going to get from him, fine. Come off the bench, spot starts here and there. You are not my everyday right fielder. You have to go out and find another outfielder, two outfielders, really. And what I'm seeing rumors from Michael Marino and others as well, talking about trades for Manuel Margot. It's like, look, I understand that this team needs outfielders. You need bodies, essentially. And you want to pick and choose certain spots. But Manuel Margot, guys missed, I think, like 136 games over the last 2 years. Not the greatest of numbers at all. So it's like, that's not your offensive answer. Maybe he can help a little bit on the defensive side, but overall, not pretty. So that's why I keep on saying a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, I agree with you, obviously. I don't expect Marte to get back to, what he was before. But it's more of me saying, look, it has to be, because at this point you can't move him. And so you have to hope he rebounds to some semblance. The other thing I'll pose to you is this way. Let's say the Mets go out and they acquire, I'm not even going to say who it is.
Okay.
The Mets get a starting caliber outfielder.
Okay.
Either in free agency or via trade. Because for the purposes of this argument, it doesn't matter who it is. Somebody who is a consensus starting caliber outfielder.
Fair enough.
Would you be okay with the Mets then platooning Marte with DJ Stewart?
Ooh, I mean, when you talk about Stearns and the idea of defense, and like he likes having good defenders, and run prevention's been a big thing. That's been a big buzzword for him lately. I think that platoon is not very strong in terms of run prevention. Look, I thought Stewart did okay out there. We have some of those highlights where he embarrassed himself a little bit, but like I said, between that,
nobody had more highlights and lowlights in the same season than DJ Stewart.
Right. It's
he made like remarkable, unbelievable catches, and then it was like sometimes you're like, is he not wearing a glove?
What
happened? How did that happen? What are his shoes tied together? And then he's like diving into the third row. You know what I mean? You're like, what the fuck?
I would say that if that ended up happening, even if you got a solid left fielder, say, whoever that may be, just to stay with what you were saying, you got a solid field, but you have to settle for Marte and Stewart and Wright. I think that, I would really hope that you killed it in terms of like really building the pitching and the pen. Then you would have to when I say killed it, I mean like no one's hitting the ball then. Like I mean like killing it that way, because I think you're going to be giving up a good amount of runs when the ball's hit the right field.
I'm not, and just to be clear, I'm not advocating for that.
No, of course. I get what you're
question.
saying.
I talked at the end of the season about, Stewart playing himself into what I called at least a spring training invite. That's what I said. I was like, the guy doesn't deserve a spot on the bench, but he played well enough with this team, the way this team is moving forward, where you're like, hey, we got to start talking about, maybe he has a role, because he looks like he does some things that they hoped that they were going to get out of Vogelback, while also being able to have a glove and go out there and play the field. Subway to Shea, Ant saying Stewart had a good couple weeks, but really slumped at the end. Don't let that fool you into bringing him back. Again, I'm not super advocating for this as much as I'm just trying to be realistic as to where they can go, because they can't fix all of this in an offseason.
Yes,
and I think
agreed.
In a year where you're stuck with Marte, I say that respectfully, you could do worse than starting the season with a legitimate left fielder, Brandon Nimmo, and then a platoon of Marte and DJ Stewart. I just think something like that we're going to have to be ready for. And it's not the answer all Met fans want.
Right.
But I think some of that is what you have to prepare for. The other thing that you look at with this depth chart is you look at third base. Beatty, no. Vientos, he's not a third baseman, regardless of, how he's going to field, how he's going to hit. He's not a third baseman. Guillorme, Guillorme is a decent backup player on a bad team.
I feel like, again, we've never had like negative things. Sorry to cut you off, but like we've never really had like a lot of negative things to say about Guillorme. But at the same time, I feel like it's time to like, cut the cord. Like
you got to be honest about Guillorme.
Like you got to move on. Like I think we're getting to a point where it's like we could be better.
Yes, Guillorme is like a poor man's Jeff McNeil. Like he does some of the things that McNeil does without the 330 batting average. You know what I mean? Like he plays a lot of spots. He's better defensively, but he has less power. He puts a lot of bat to ball, but he's not fast. So when he puts the bat to ball, it's not necessarily a good thing. I like Guillorme. I think he's a great story. I think his defense is terrific. But again, you said part of the thing is we have to get better. And people talk the last 2 seasons, last year in a bad season, the year before in a good season, about this bench mob. The bench mob has been bad. Guillorme's not good. Tomas Nito's not good. Like some of these players, Travis Jankowski, they're not good. Tim LaCastro's not good.
World Series champion Travis Jankowski. How dare you?
Good for him. Good. Great. That's terrific. The pride of the Stony Brook. I don't give a shit. He's not good. Like he's not. Not.
No, I get it. I get it.
And I'm not saying these guys don't fill roles over short times, but like that's what they all are. They're short-term fixes. Carson saying Guillorme is like McNeil, correct? Because he's it is. I'm trying to not have there be dead air, but this it's not good programming if me and Ibby just laugh for 5 uninterrupted seconds. Okay. That said, I just think you have to be realistic about some of these things.
No, I agree.
Look, when you look around the infield, if you trade Jeff McNeil, Mauricio could play second, but then what do you do at third? If you put Mauricio at third because he earns the spot more so than Beatty or Vientos, then you kind of want to keep McNeil around to play second base, or maybe you want to go to, maybe Acuna is ready. Maybe there are a lot of different machinations that Met fans are going to have to be prepared for. Is what I'm saying.
I totally get you. I really think that look, this is very early and this could change depending on how, Davis Stearns choose to go. But right now, November 15th, if I had a guess, I would say that I think you're going to see Mauricio more so at third base. And I really think based off of, again, copycat league, in any sense, when you see other teams doing well when it comes to contact and things like that, do I think everyone's going to try and copy what the Diamondbacks did? No, because you can't do that. But I do think that good teams are going to try to fill out lineups. And I think that the Mets will get an opportunity to try and shop Jeff McNeil. And look, I really think there's a good chance that he does get dealt. I do. Because again, there's only so much that you can have in terms of talent down low that you're going to have to try to get an understanding of. And let's be honest, the Mets have a lot of talent in terms of, middle infielders. So getting an idea of what can provide. And I think Luis Angel Acuna is the closest. So we might see him relatively early. So I think that there is an opportunity.
Acuna can make the team out of spring if he has a strong spring.
I think it's possible. Of course, Carson's not going to like that, but I do think that
I think he could, especially if they have an opening, if they trade McNeil, or if somebody sucks, they're gonna look. They're gonna give these guys a prolonged look, and I think Acuna is first up.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of places that McNeil could make sense. I know Carson's been saying, I've been thinking it as well when it comes to like Seattle. A place like that makes sense. They're looking for a contact hitter. You're not going to get blown away with what you're going to get in return. But look, if it gives me an able back-end starter, yeah. If it gives me a solid bullpen piece, yeah. Like you got to give up something to improve yourself elsewhere because you have other players that you can plug into that spot. And I think that, I think Jeff McNeil, his best, as crazy as it sounds, instead of the idea of Jeff McNeil batting .310 for us, I think he serves us better to get us a player at another position. That means Jeff helps us the most when he's not on this team.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that. Blake Snell just announced that he won the NL Cy Young. Congratulations to him. I think he's the only the 7th pitcher to win the Cy Young in both leagues, something like that, 7th or 8th. So obviously that's a big deal for him. Congrats. I think a lot of people are throwing out some things that make sense, either if it's tongue in cheek or if it's totally serious. Like I saw something for, hey, what about Kevin Kiermaier? I think something like that on a short-term deal could make sense. People saying, Max Kepler to play right field. Twins are trying to cut payroll. Absolutely. Sign me up.
I love Max Kepler. I like Max
Yeah,
Kepler.
Max Kepler's a damn good ball player. Carson saying when we trade for Eugenio Suarez, it's going to make sense, folks. Relax. But I think even something like that, like in the right scenario, I think all of those things make sense and are things that you should be prepared for. Look, I don't know.
Yeah, Mets fans are really going to be able to handle Eugenio Suarez's strikeout rate. They're really going to be able to handle it. But no, I get it. I'll take the power.
Rossi saying McNeil to the Brewers with prospects for Burns and Yelich. Look, what prospects? Like, that's a very open-ended, like, hey, let me just throw this out there thing. No disrespect, John. I'm just saying, like, that's, but like, there's something there. There's a framework there that makes sense where you say, okay, we're going to take on Yelich's money. We're going to give you prospects for Burns, but in turn, we want to give you somebody to clear some money. Like, even that is not outrageous. There are some things here, and none of them are going to be like slam dunk great. I think the one that would be slam dunk great, Ibby, of all the offseason moves is the one we keep talking about, and that's Yamamoto.
Yeah.
You sign Yamamoto, he's 25 years old. You get him on a, whatever it is. It's a 5-year deal. It's a 6-year deal. It's an 8-year deal, whatever. You got a 25-year-old ace to pair with another guy who's, 29, 30 years old, who almost won Rookie of the Year, getting Cy Young votes, things like that. Like, so now you're cooking. I think that is the big thing there. Look, I know we said we were going to do something with free agency. We're at an hour now. Do you want to dive into that? Do you want to save it for next week? What do you think?
I mean, if you want to do a little bit just to continue the conversation, I got a little bit of time.
Okay.
It's up to you.
So one of the things we said we were going to do is look at MLB.com's top ranked free agents, top 25 for the 2023, 2024, off season, all that nonsense, and just kind of give our rapid fire opinions on some of these guys, if we think the Mets are going to pursue them, and if we, John and Ibby, think that the Mets should. So we'll start right off the rip. Number 1 free agent, Ibby, the always polarizing in this case, Shohei Ohtani. Do you think the Mets will go after him, and then do you think the Mets should go after him? What is happening to my background? Who's doing this?
I don't know, man.
Did I do that? Is somebody doing that? What the fuck was it? Am I dying?
It's funny because you put your hands up and like all the stuff went off behind you. It's pretty funny.
Yeah,
I'm Kane. Do I think that they're gonna, try to have a conversation? Of course, their name's gonna get bantered about because it's the Mets and they have the richest owner. Do I think he's going to end up here? I don't. We've been saying that for the longest time. I think he's going to end up in LA. But of course, you make the phone call. You're dumb if you don't. You try. But I do not think that Shohei Ohtani is going to be here. No.
Fair enough. Stevie Mac saying the mushrooms are kicking in, John, and Ant saying please make that a YouTube short. I think
I will try to, Ant. I will.
So I agree with you. Look, I think when you have a player like this, I think it is malpractice. You get the Manny Machados, the Bryce Harpers, the Shohei Ohtanis. They don't always become free agents. I think if you have the most money and you have a need, and everybody has a need for great players, you go and you try. I think the Mets will try. I don't think the Mets will get him. And honestly, going back to need and all that stuff that you're talking about, I think he's not a great fit for the Mets right now. I don't think that he is this makes a ton of sense right now for them and what they need and where they're going. Now, again, if they sign him, I am going to be happy. But I don't know if it's the perfect marriage. Now, that changes completely if he didn't have Tommy John surgery, Ibby. Because if you're telling me you can get a left-handed complement to Pete Alonso and an ace-level pitcher in one player, sure. Now I'm changing completely. I still want Yamamoto, but I'm saying, hey, you know what? Ohtani, I'll go with it. Next player on the list is Yamamoto. I think we can skip him simply because we both talked about it. We both think the Mets should. We both want the Mets
Number
to.
one
I
target.
think he is the jewel of the offseason for the
Number
Mets.
one target.
Number
yes.
3 is a person we just talked about, 31 years old, left-handed pitcher. Blake Snell now becomes the 7th person ever to win the Cy Young in both leagues. Blake Snell.
A fan of Blake Snell, I am, but I think that based off of, was he 30 years old?
31.
31 price that it's going to cost, coupled with the qualifying offer. I don't think the Mets are going to go after him. If they do, and if they choose to opt and go that route because they don't care because they think he fits what they're trying to do, look, I'm not going to complain. Blake Snell's a damn good pitcher, but I don't think he's going to be a focus for the team. No.
Yeah, and everybody who's watching, continue to throw those thumbs up and likes with the conversation, and of course, throw your 2 cents in on any and all of these players. Look, for me and Blake Snell, any pitcher that comes up on this list, any starting pitcher, I'm going to say, well, sure, because the Mets need that much starting pitching. Need I remind you who the starting pitching is on their depth chart? After Senga and Quintana, It is ugly as fuck. McGill is not good. Lucchesi is okay. Like, honestly, of all these people, I would be most comfortable with Lucchesi being the 5th starter, I think, to start the season, just because of what he has shown. Do I think he has the highest upside? No, but do I think he is the best pitcher on day 1 to be your 5th starter? Of who they have there, yes. And I'm saying that because getting 2 starting pitchers of significance that are going to be automatically inserted into your rotation is going to be an expensive, costly endeavor, and you're not guaranteed when you're in these markets. So anytime there is a starting pitcher on the list, I'm going to say, sure, maybe, whatever, go after him if you want. But I think with Snell, you're buying high. Snell has had some great years. He's had some bad years. He's coming off of a Cy Young. He's 31 years old. I don't think he is the right fit at the right time, but I'm not going to be mad if the Mets go after him. I think also the Mets are going to kick the tires on any starting pitcher, and so maybe they give him a call. Yeah. But I don't think he's going to be worth, he's probably going to want like a 6-7 year deal or something like that. And I just don't think.
I thought somebody brought up a great point. I'm sorry to cut you off. Somebody brought up a great point. They're like, he's probably going to want to push to make more than what Gausman got, which was like 120, and more than what Robbie Ray got. That's what they were saying. And look, he can push for that because he could say, look, I have 2 Cy Youngs. I have a better resume. Like he wouldn't be wrong in pushing for more. Will he get it? That's the big question.
Rael saying no after Scherzer and Verlander coming off of Cy Young is a curse. Interesting take. Not terrible, just considering what's happened for us. I don't know if it's a curse, but it hasn't been great. Patty saying, in contrast to Snell, Montgomery, we can talk about him when we get down the list. I think that's a more realistic option, to be honest. I don't think Snell would be a good fit. Carson saying Snell in New York is not a good match, in my opinion. Blake Snell might be the nicest baseball player I've ever met, but I don't think he's a great fit. This next guy is somebody I championed for on this show. We talked about it last week. That's Cody Bellinger, 28 years old. Coming off of a big year, took a prove-it deal, and good for him because he proved it. Ibby, I think the year for the Mets to get Cody Bellinger was last year. I don't think he's as good of a fit. Now, again, the Mets do need outfielders. They do. I'm not going to say I'm going to be angry if they get him. But I don't think that Cody Bellinger is a fit with where the Mets are right now and where they're trying to go. I think he's going to want a big deal that's, 5 years or whatever. And I just don't know if you want to commit that money to a guy who I think is very talented, but has been very up and down. And I don't know that I want to do that. Now, that said, if they say, hey, we're signing Cody Bellinger, he's going to play center field, Nimmo's going to move to left, I'm not going to be angry. Yeah. It's not my money. You always go back to that. It's not my money. I just don't know. I like him as a player. I wouldn't pursue him high on my list if I were the Mets this season.
Team is desperate for outfielders, but at the same time, I'm with you. I don't think they're going to go after him. I just don't think that this team, to echo what you were just saying, the team's not there. There are other teams that are closer, that have outfield needs, that have middle of the lineup needs, that have center field needs, that make a lot more sense to go after a Cody Bellinger, and will probably get a Cody Bellinger. And I don't think the Mets are shopping in that aisle because it doesn't make the most sense for them. So I don't think they're going to be in that market either.
Yeah, and Carson saying it's going to be a 6 to 8 year deal. Maybe it's that long. No thanks. And I agree. If you're going in that
He'll push
territory,
for it.
yeah, I don't want it. And honestly, I mean, you can make the case that he's the best position player available. Like, obviously, there's Shohei Ohtani and then everybody else, but you can make a case. Bellinger's right there in terms of available players just for money on the free agent market. Next up is Aaron Nola, 31 years old. To me, Nola is a little bit the opposite of Snell. I think Nola, even though they're the same age, I think
He's going to get more
Nola's on
money.
a little. What?
I think Nola's going to get more money than Snell.
You think Nola's going to get more money than Snell? See, I thought maybe you could get Nola for a little less, and that would intrigue me more. But if you're thinking that he's going to get more money, I don't think he's a fit. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's for me. I think if you get him for a little less, I think it's good. I think if you can't,
qualifying offer takes him off the table a little bit too, because I think they really are going to eliminate that from their thought process unless they are shut out in other areas. People look to the ERA on Nola a lot too over the last 2 years, not the greatest. But I think he is if all things were proper for this team, I would love to have Aaron Nola. I think he could pitch in New York. I think with a good defense behind him, I think he could do really well. I'm sure the Phillies are going to try to retain him as well. But I don't think that they are going to, be in that market for the reasons I just said, because I don't think they're going to pay that money for him at the age that he is. In terms of where this team is on their timeline, again, he would have made sense if this team was a lot closer, but this team is not there right now. So, again, phone call, sure, their name's going to be there because, again, it's the Mets, but I don't think he's going to be a fit either.
I don't think so. Again, you're talking about starting pitching. The Mets need a lot of it, and so they're going to call. And like you said, if they get shut out, like all of these things, like none of them exist in a vacuum, right? When you look at, if the Mets don't get Yamamoto, well, now Snell becomes an option. Nola becomes an option. Like these guys start to become realistic options. But I think when your target is clearly Yamamoto because of age, upside, and ability and trajectory with the team, I think when you start to look at where these other guys fill in, they're just not necessarily the best fits. Ant saying Jordan Hicks, I am all over. We haven't gotten to him. I love Jordan Hicks. No qualifying offer. And I think that sometimes the Mets have suffered from having a lack of stuff in the bullpen. Edwin Diaz has so much fucking stuff. He's a great pitcher, but he's got stuff that when he's not perfect, he can still blow you away. And I know Jordan Hicks, the ERA isn't always there. Sometimes gives out the home run ball. I understand that. Give me the guy that throws 103 miles an hour, Ibby. Like, give me that guy. You don't always want to have, you got Edwin Diaz. And so now to set him up, you'll bring in Adam Ottavino, who throws sliders. You know what I mean? Like, it's always kind of been, sometimes that recipe works.
A lack of arm talent that this team has had for a while. A lack of arm talent.
Yes, that's what it is. It is a sincere lack of arm talent in the bullpen. Somebody following it up by saying, don't forget about relievers. And Carson saying, well, Epler forgot about it, so should we. It's a great point, and Anthony's laughing about it. So I think stuff like that is important. Ibby, let's get through. We did 5. Let's do the next 5 and just do the top 10, and then we'll get out of here. Fine. We'll save the rest for next week.
That works.
The next one is a reliever. Josh Hader, 30 years old, going to command big money. I would say on paper, Josh Hader's not a fit. But I don't know. Stearns had Hader. If Stearns really likes Hader.
Also traded him, though.
Also traded him. Yes, he had him, traded him.
And regretted it.
Right. You're like, had him, good. Traded him, not good. Regretted it, good. You know what I mean? Like, so you're kind of all over the map. I think there's a situation where the Mets say, we got burned not having great talent as far as the relief corps goes. Let's have the best bullpen we can have. Let's have a guy that can actually close on days where where Edwin isn't available. Let's have a guy that can close if Edwin needs to get up to speed. I think Carlos's point here is a good one. I think he wants to be a closer. I think that's fair. I don't think it matters if you pay him like a closer.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they will. I'm saying it's not crazy, even though it doesn't seem like a huge need. That's all I'm saying. We need arm talent. The same reason why you want Hicks, you need arm talent in the bullpen.
1000%. And, obviously Hader is all that in spades, but yeah, I do think he wants to be a closer. And I think based off of the needs of some contenders, that being the Rangers or anyone else of that ilk, who have a need in that spot, I think he makes a lot more sense there. I know everyone's going to assume, because of that Brewer connection, how he had him and, pitching lab and all that stuff. They're going to assume, oh my God, how can they not get him? You got to get the guy. You got to have Hader and Diaz. It's like, again, this bullpen needs like 4 arms, not just one. And Hader's been very adamant about, I'm not a multiple inning guy. Like I'm a 1 inning guy. That's what I am. And he's really, dropped the hammer on that over the last year or so. So would I love to have him? Of course, it's Josh freaking Hader. But do I think it's going to happen? I do not.
I also don't think it's going to happen. Again, I'm just, it's on paper. It seems like it's definitely not a match. And I think there's an avenue for it, but ultimately I don't think it makes sense. Carson saying I'd rather trade for Devin Williams than chuck $20 million a year.
I would love to have Devin Williams too. And if the Brewers are being true and they're saying that everyone's available, then yeah, that's one of the guys that I'm calling about, not named Corbin Burns, but at the same time, I'm not a big fan of dealing away prime prospects for bullpen arms. But again, it would be dependent on what the ask is. And, if there's anything else in return, like if it's like eating money on a contract that they're trying to get out of or things like that. There are, like you said, many machinations where things can make a lot more sense, but I'm not huge on trading, prospects for relievers, especially when your team's not close to winning.
The next guy on the list is somebody you commented on already. I'll let you say if you want to add anything onto it. Sonny Gray, 34 years old, free agent starting pitcher. Has been good everywhere except New York.
Look, I love Sonny Gray. I was championing Sonny Gray to my Yankee fan friends when they traded for him from Oakland. And obviously they hated me after the fact because he didn't do so hot. But look, I don't have the information in front of me, but I also remember reading that the Yanks really tried to screw with him in terms of, his pitch selection and things of that nature, where it kind of threw him off, making him use pitches as a strikeout pitch when he knew it wasn't a strikeout pitch. And that's why his numbers were inflated. And again, I think that there's a lot more to pitching outside of just saying, oh, this guy can't handle New York. But I could say, well, every stop that Sonny Gray has had, he's been phenomenal. And I think that it's smart people handling him where he's able to go out there and perform. I don't think it's just this guy can't pitch in New York. I think it's lazy, and I think that it's improper. And I think he's had a hell of a career, and he's fantastic. But again, 34 years old, going to get close to $100 million as he deserves because he's been phenomenal for the Twins. He was great when he'd stop in Cincinnati as well. But not a fit here, unfortunately, because this team, like I said, not close, and I don't think they're going to spend $100 million on a 34-year-old pitcher.
Yeah, for me, it's that. For me, it's the age and the money. He deserves all the money he can get. He should get it. There's a part of me that says the age does line up if it means you can give him less money. But in the case of Sonny Gray, it's simply not that, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like when you look at Sonny Gray, he's been really good and he's going to get paid. But it's because of that, he doesn't line up. If he was 34 years old and a guy who was just kind of coming into his own and didn't have the resume, and you could get him like on a lesser deal, a 1-year deal, 2-year deal, then I think he makes all the sense in the world to be somewhere in your rotation. But that's simply not the case. He's too good, if that makes sense. Like he's too good and too old for the Mets.
Yes.
And, again, you factor in qualifying offer situations and things like that. I just don't, I don't think that's a fit. Number 9 on the list is a strictly DH, 36 years old, J.D. Martinez. Now, J.D. Martinez, I said I didn't want him heading into last year. I thought he was done with his back. He proved us all wrong. He had 33 home runs, had 101 RBI, OPS 893. I mean, great value on that deal for $10 million 1 year. That said, no. I can't trust he's going to do it again. I can't trust his back is going to be healthier as he gets older.
Yeah.
And to Ant's point here, anybody but Vogelback, absolutely. But I don't want – this team is young. This team is going to have a lot of people, I think, that you want to move around. And I don't want to lock up the DH role with a 36-year-old guy with a bad back that doesn't own a glove. I saw this movie already. I mean, look, you would have killed somebody. Like, we would kill for Vogelback to have the production that I just named from JD Martinez. But I don't want another slow DH only lumbering guy. I don't want it. I don't want him.
I think that, again, made sense potentially at a deadline or with his team was pushing all in like last year. Now, look, needs a DH, but like you said, I think they're going to try to get someone that fits in at DH, but that can also rotate around the diamond, whether it's in the infield or the outfield, and use it as a keep fresh spot as opposed to locking in 1,000%. So JD Martinez, I am also out in that market.
Well, John Rossi mentioned this before, I think. I don't want to scroll all the way up because there's been a lot of comments since. He said, what about signing a guy like Justin Turner to be a part-time third baseman, part-time first baseman, sometime DH?
Yeah.
To me, that makes more sense than going for JD Martinez. And then, even Carson saying Soler, Peterson, Teoscar Hernandez, all better options than JD Martinez at this moment. And I think
Agreed.
That's also true. Look, I know Justin Turner is old and he's not the same player, and this is not trying to make right that the Mets non-tendered him. I just, as a 1-for-1,
I want him.
That move makes more sense to me.
Yeah.
Because you can still put him at third. Now, can he play third every day like he did with the Dodgers 5-6 years ago? No. But he third. He can play first. He can be a right-handed bat off the bench.
He also played second, believe it or not, for the Red Sox last year too. So he moved around. The Red Sox, Red Sox did a great job of keeping him fresh and rotating him around the diamond, whether it was at third, first, a little bit of second at the end of the season, and the DH spot. They did a fantastic job of keeping him healthy. And again, I did a short on it for the channel. Did really well when it came to the views. He had a fantastic year when everyone thought he was done after 9 years in LA, and he goes to Boston and he has 26 home runs, 96 RBIs, a fantastic slash line. And it's like the guy, when kept healthy, is still a damn good hitter. And I think he makes a lot more sense, in my opinion, because of what he can offer in comparison to a JD Martinez. And also to Carson's point, I'm also big on the idea of Soler as well as someone else.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing that all these people, everybody's naming, all have in common, right? Like when you look at Carson's comment again, Soler, Peterson, Hernandez, Ant Rivera saying Soler, Patty saying Soler, Stevie Mack saying take a chance on Duvall, Peterson if you want somebody to back up Pete, Carson saying Gio Urshela. Take your pick. I'm not going to advocate over any of these guys over anybody else, except for the fact that JD Martinez, what's the one thing they all have in common? They all own baseball gloves and can go out and play the field. I understand to varying degrees. Certain guys are not going to win Gold Glove awards. Like, Soler is not going to wow you in terms of his ability to play defense, but you can put him out there. He's got a good arm. Obviously Urshela, very good defensively. That's another low-key one. I don't know if he's the hitter that Turner is, but maybe Turner's on the downside. Maybe Urshela's still got some good years. You can make cases for all these guys. I just don't want somebody who's a zero with
another
versatility.
Reason. Yeah.
It's the zero for me.
Yeah. And I'm with you on that 100% because, again, you have to have – and they spoke on it, whether it was Mendoza or – Stearns talking about flexibility, and Mendoza mentioned it a lot in a lot of his, the presser itself, his post pressers, other places talking about flexibility. So I think that's going to be something that is something that goes into their roster construction. And also, look, read it a lot of places. Remember it as well. David Stearns has tried for a lot of years especially when he was in Milwaukee, trying to attain Justin Turner. They never had the money. They never had the proper things to get him. So again, does that love or does that affection die out because he's 38 years old? But he does kind of fit a need with where you are right now, and you could probably get him for 2 years. Is that too much for a 38-year-old? Possibly. But look, the reason why he opted out is because he had a fantastic year and he thinks I can still hit, I can still play, I can make money. So maybe you can get him for that 2-year deal. Now you finally have the means when it comes to money to get him. We'll finally see if he gets the guy that he's always wanted.
Yeah, Douglas Barnes saying flexibility. McNeil, look, we've talked a little bit about McNeil, and I don't want to beat a dead horse on this. I think McNeil, I said before, I think he has value to this team, especially because they need so many holes to fill. I do think, though, at the same time, because he's so team-friendly in the contract, that he is a trade candidate. Also, Ibby, we talked about what J.D. Martinez is different from all those other guys that were mentioned in the chat, right? Mm-hmm. And it's the fact that he has zero flexibility. Zero. McNeil has a ton of it, but the way McNeil is different from all those other guys in the chat too is that if McNeil is not hitting 310 or higher, he is a useless player offensively. Useless. Useless. And I say that with respect to a guy who's a batting champion. I like McNeil's game. I'm not as harsh as Carson is on McNeil's ability, but he has to hit a minimum of 310. Otherwise, he is useless because he makes too much contact, if you can believe it. He doesn't walk enough. He's not fast enough to make the contact that he makes where you're like, wow, you hit it on the ground. Maybe you get a base hit out of it. He has almost too much bat control where he doesn't lift the ball consistently. He makes a lot of slap contact. And then, therefore, he doesn't drive in a ton of runs. He doesn't hit for a ton of power, which is okay. That's not his game. But if you look at a guy like Justin Turner, and I don't know his full numbers, Justin Turner can be a productive hitter at 250. He could be a productive hitter at 280. We've seen him be a productive hitter at 315. Now, I don't think he's ever going to be 315 again like he was in his prime. But we've seen Justin Turner. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. We've seen Justin Turner be a productive hitter in almost a 100, like an 85-point batting average swing.
Yeah.
If McNeil is hitting 250, he's horrendous.
Yeah.
And he's bad. He's a bad player at 250. Everybody wants to talk about, oh my God, Pete, what is Pete doing hitting 210? 210, 45, 120. I want more than 210, but 45, 120 is nothing to sneeze
I can work with that. Yeah, I can work with that. And it doesn't, it doesn't help McNeil. It doesn't help McNeil that he's in a lineup like this because you expect more. So that's why I said before, like it makes more sense if he can, fit in, whether it's in a leadoff spot or 8-9 spot on a given team where he can just slap the ball around, get on base, and then the rest of a given lineup can just drive him in. Can't do that in this lineup right now. It's when you're expected to be the guy that just again puts the quarter in the merry-go-round essentially to try and try to get some runs. And Carson's talked about this a lot too. And just mentioning how it's a lot harder to get 4 base hits as opposed to hitting a home run. And look, is that the right way to look at baseball now? I mean, with the way that pitching is gone, it's harder. Relievers are throwing harder, stars are throwing harder. So it's like you got a better shot hitting a home run than you do running into 4 singles based on how these guys are throwing now. But I don't want to bury the guy too much. I just think that I think it's gotten to a point where I think McNeil serves us better not on the team. Yeah,
and look, Carlos saying he got away from his swing, and that's a fair thing. But now, like, I don't want to dig up old stuff, but Ibby, we both said McNeil was primed for a comeback last season on our on our preview show, and he did. He did have a huge comeback, won the batting title, right? Like we said that he was primed for one, but now you look at 2 of the last 3 seasons where he's not been good. So he got away from his swing. Maybe is he going to get back to it, or is he going to lose it again? So I just think that McNeil is.
It's questions. It's questions like that. It's questions like that you just said that this team can't afford. There's Correct. Too many questions as is. You can't have more questions. You have to eliminate questions. You have to get answers. That's what you need.
Right. And Carson saying McNeil's a leadoff hitter on a team that gave $162 million to their real leadoff hitter who provides 15 to 20 home run power because Jeremy Barnes is a Chad. But no, there is some truth to that. Like, I was going to bring this back up and then we'll get into the final player and then I'll let you go. But when you look at this lineup, to your point, McNeil needs to either hit 1, he's not going to, Nimmo's a better leadoff hitter. 2, he shouldn't. Lindor's a better 2-hitter. 3, when he's going really well, McNeil, that is, could hit 3 if he's hitting 330. Well, he hasn't really done that, so Lindor's a better 3-hitter. A healthy Marte is a better 2-hitter. So now all of a sudden, you're like, well, he can't hit 1, 2, or 3 in this lineup as it's constructed, which is not going to be the lineup, but it was the lineup at the end of the season last year. So all of a sudden, he's not a 4, he's not a 5, he's not a 6, he's not really a 7. You're talking 8 or 9, and now that means you have to get actual production from Beatty or Stewart or whatever, and you're not getting that. So is it 100% McNeil's fault? Maybe not, but them's the breaks. You know what I mean? Like, it is what it is. Last guy on this list is a guy who is intriguing because I think he helps, but for me is going to be a no, and that is 31-year-old, great fielder, tons of pop. I know Carson loves him. Matt Chapman, third base.
I'll keep mine short and sweet. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Mainly because the ups and downs are way too extreme for me. The idea of that happening in New York, and just, again, I don't want to comp the guy to like a Jason Bay, but that's what like I fear. It's like you come to this market, and again, I'm not trying to say that you're going to die just because of a given market, but you know, the ups and downs are handled differently by players, and I don't know if his downs would really benefit him as a player. Because again, he's done this in other places. When you do that here, it's going to be hard to dig yourself out of that, because by the time you're in the midst of that downfall, before you're even allowed to come back up, you're already 6 feet in the ground with this fan base, with these people here, with this media. It's ridiculous. I don't think it's a fit, and I think they're better served figuring out in-house what they have at third base as opposed to paying a third baseman.
Shay saying nope. Patty saying no. Following it up by saying Mets fans will make him cry. I think, Ibby, you nailed a lot of it. He's done what he's done in Oakland and Toronto. Not exactly media hotbeds, not exactly baseball towns.
That's who he is as a player.
And that's
fantastic
I like
fielder.
Him.
Fantastic fielder.
I like him a lot. Look, even Carson, I'll give his comment first. Chapman is great, but Toronto ruined him. His tendencies are too impressionable to guarantee a bounce back to what he was. I do agree with some of that, in that I think he was a better player early in Oakland than he's become now. I think he's more streaky, to your point. I think he's ups and downs, too many strikeouts. But I also think when I look at Matt Chapman, this is a compliment. If you could take out all the noise, like you said, if this was MLB The Show, I would trade for Matt Chapman, or I would sign Matt Chapman if I was running a team. Mm-hmm. But in the real world, playing in New York, for the reasons you outlined, the reasons Carson outlined, I can't in good conscience give this guy a big deal. Now, when I look at this, again, this ugly graphic, and I see Beatty, Vientos, Guillorme, that makes me go, fucking maybe. No, but I really like Ronnie Mauricio. You know, I'm not as high on Acuna or Jet Williams. Not saying I don't like them. I just don't think they're the untouchable prospects a lot of other people think that they are. But that's a lot of infield depth. I think Ronnie Mauricio can play third base. I think when Ronnie Mauricio gets bigger and he gets heavier as he gets older, I think Ronnie Mauricio is going to be a third baseman anyways. I think do it now and let him be your O'Neal Cruz type player. Let him be, what's the dude in Cincinnati?
Well, he's not Ellie De La Cruz, but I know what you're trying to say.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, like he's not, I know he's not them, but let him be that kind of player with big body, lean, fast, big arm. Let him be that. To me, Mauricio is, and I've said it before on this show, the only untouchable prospect on this team is Francisco Alvarez. It's partially because of what he showed, and it's partially because he's a catcher, and you just don't trade catchers that show what they showed. Period.
Yeah.
The next closest guy for me is Mauricio. He's the guy who's shown the most, to me, ability. And that includes Vientos, that includes Beatty, that includes, like, to me, Mauricio is the next best player that the Mets have in terms of young player. Now, Acuna could pass him. Gilbert could pass him. Jet Williams could pass him. Other people can pass him. To this point, I think if you're worried about production there, Let people fight it out. And if you want to bring in Justin Turner or Gio Urshela and somebody that can play third base so that if you get to spring training and Beatty sucks, Vientos sucks, Mauricio sucks, you have a guy who can play there, I have no problem with that. I'm not saying you hand somebody the job. I'm just saying you have enough options that you don't have to give Matt Chapman a big deal.
Agreed. I'm with you on that because, again, there's no reason based off of all the needs that we've highlighted throughout this show so far, and we will continue to in shows to come. There are just way too many holes to fill to waste that given money, to waste that type of stuff on a Matt Chapman type. Let him go to San Francisco. Let him go to another team that needs a bat, that can use his defense, that's better suited for him as opposed to being here. There's no reason to throw 120, 140 million dollars, whatever it's going to cost to bring him in. Figure it out in-house. There's more than enough options on the infield for this team. And also, yes, please go after the likes of a Justin Turner instead, or an Urshela or something along those lines. That's more palatable than dishing out giant cash to a streaky player like Chapman.
Yeah, and Stevie Mack says, we'll just get a couple comments really quick to take us out of here. Stearns already shut down the idea of Beatty and Mauricio playing left field again. And that's why I think when you look at McNeil and Acuna and Beatty and all these guys, they have infielders. They're going to, if they add somewhere significantly, they're going to add.
People are getting dealt, man. People are getting dealt. That's
absolutely. Some of the prospects are getting dealt.
People are getting dealt.
Some of the people on the team are getting dealt. I'm just saying that I think the upgrade, if you're going to see a significant offensive upgrade, is going to come in the form of a player that can play the outfield. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's what we're going to see. Now, I'm saying that acknowledging that because of the length of the contract, I wouldn't consider Justin Turner a significant upgrade simply because, yeah, it's probably going to be a 2-year deal, right? Like, I don't consider that significant despite the fact that he had almost 100 RBI and he would be a welcome addition to the lineup. So, you know, when I look at that, that's where my head goes. And Shay saying Hunger Games for 3B. I don't know. I'm not familiar with Hunger Games. What's his on-base percentage like?
First of all, I think we found Carson's burner. I think Joe K and Carson are the same person. Acuna swings a noodle. People are just dreaming of him being the second coming of his brother. I think Joe K and Carson are the same person. I don't know.
They might be. They might just be. No, listen. That's a fair critique, but I'm not willing to write off. I'm not willing to write off the kid just yet. You know what I mean? Like, people are higher on him than I am. I'm not as low as him as they are, but you know, I think people are going to get traded. I think you're 100% right. I mean, Douglas Barnes saying Beatty traded before McNeil. I'd trade both of them.
I challenge you on that one, Douglas. I think McNeil goes before Beatty.
I do too. I would trade both of them. If you could, I mean, now again, you're selling low, but if somebody's like, oh my God, this guy, Brett Beatty, I'll tell you what, his swing, blah, 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 blah. To me, I like Beatty, but hits the ball on the ground too much. Like, there's problems. So, you know, listen, there's a lot of people I would trade. There's about 5 people I wouldn't. Everybody else, it depends what you're going to give me back. But, you know, I'm not trading Senga, Nimmo, Lindor, Alonso, Diaz, and Alvarez. Those are the 6 players. Anybody else, business is open. So that's it.
It's hard, it's hard not to think that way because, again, there are a lot of needs. There are a lot of things that have to get filled out. And in order to get, you have to give. And you're not going to be able to get everything on the free agent market. There's going to be a lot of trades. We'll see how Stearns goes about it. And again, I've said this multiple times, people on Twitter, and I'll end it here with this. It's exciting from a roster building construction standpoint. Like, when you look at this team and you see you have David Stearns, yes, it's nerve-wracking as a fan because you have no idea what's going to happen. But at the same time, for me at least, that's the exciting thing because you get to watch someone who's renowned by many within the sport go about and build something. And he basically has, whether you want to believe it or not, it's pretty much like a blank canvas because, look, you have certain guys that are plugged in, but only certain contracts are really long-term. Everything else, including Pete Alonso, as much as we don't want to say that, but including Pete Alonso, it's fair game. So we'll see how David Stearns goes about building everything, and it's gonna be fun to watch.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to ask you a question point blank. This is just Ibby's opinion, and we'll go on this. Do you think that David Stearns will acquire player or players of significance from his old team. And the reason why I ask you that is because for the last 2 years, the Mets have been linked to Burns and Yelich and take this deal to get that guy. And Carson mentions Devin Williams. And do you think there is an avenue where Stearns will acquire somebody of significance from the Brewers? Now, he might acquire a minor leaguer from the Brewers that he really loved that may or may not turn into somebody. I don't mean that. I mean somebody of significance where the Mets get something where you're like, oh, shit, okay.
So that's basically saying anyone named Christian Yelich, Devin Williams, Corbin Burns, Freddie Peralta, like things along those lines.
Yeah, starting players on that team.
Do I think it's possible? Do I think there's an avenue? I would have to look at the Brewers system and what they're lacking, what they're potentially looking for in trades. Do I think that they're back against the wall when it comes to like a Burns? And if they need position players, then yes, I do think that there is a potential avenue, but that's also dependent on what other contending teams do in terms of free agency.
Sure.
If they strike out on certain things, if the Dodgers strike out on Yamamoto because they got Ohtani, but they still need pitching, so then they try and trade for, Corbin Burns, and yes, that makes all the sense to when they have a better farm system. So like, there's a lot of things that go into that question, but just looking at it straight on, do I think it's possible? Yes, I do think it's possible. Do I think it's going to happen? We'll see.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's possible.
It's definitely possible.
I don't know how likely it is. I would say it's a coin flip, 50-50. And then last one, do you think the Mets should try to get Tyler Glasnow?
I was going to say that for the next show. I wasn't sure if you were going to go there.
Okay. We can save it. Save it.
All right, we'll say
it. Show's over. No, guys, thank you. We gave you an hour and 40 minutes. We weren't sure how long we were going to go. We'll go back through these top 25 free agents next week. We obviously will not revisit the top 10, which we just did. We'll do the next 10 to 15 next week, in addition to whatever else drops in Mets land. And we'll also continue this conversation about, do you think the Mets should or will acquire Tyler Glasnow, who I love. Let's just say that. He's one of my favorites in terms of ability. So I will say that. We will talk later on about that. Subway to Shea. No! Okay, fair enough. We'll talk about it next week. That's what next week's show is for. I'm John. That's Ibby. You know the show. It's Till Mets Do His Part. Don't forget to subscribe. If you haven't liked the video yet, if you're joining us now, hit the like button on the way out. If you missed any of it, if you missed any of it, go back and watch it. You could do that. It lives forever on the YouTube channel, of course. And subscribe, turn the notifications on so that next time, if you're home and you got nothing going on and you want to watch us, well, then you will know because your YouTube app's going to be like, yo, they're doing stuff. And that's perfect. And if you can't do any of that, you can listen starting tomorrow morning, wherever it is you get your podcast, all courtesy of the Premier Podcast Network. Once again, John, Ibby, Till Mets, Do Us Part. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.